what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be completely rebuilding the serpentine belt system on a 6-cylinder E36. So the car I'm working on today is a 99 M3. This kit is the ECS tuning accessory belt kit rebuild kit. So this kit pretty much has a new main belt tensioner, a main belt, an AC belt, the idler pulley, the main tensioner pulley, and an AC pulley tensioner. So we're going to be going through and replacing pretty much all of these components today. Even just throwing new belts on, sometimes the idler pulley or the tensioner pulley, the bearings will go bad in it. Over time, the tensioners will not tension as much as they should and sort of leak, and that can cause your belt to start slipping. So it's generally just a good idea to refresh the entire system just at once while you're in there. Tools we will be using: a 3/8 driver, an 8mm Allen key socket. So the belt tensioners on both the main and the AC belt, the tool to get the tensioners off and loosen them so you can pull the belt off is an 8mm. It's not a 7, it's not a 9, it's not a Torx, it's an 8. Don't use anything else, otherwise you're going to break it. A 16mm socket, so the bolt that holds the idler pulley onto the alternator is a 16, as well as a 13mm. Pretty much all of the hardware for both tensioners is 13, and a flathead screwdriver. So the flathead screwdriver is for prying small caps off of the idler pulley and the tensioner. In addition to that, you guys might need a 32mm open-ended wrench and a fan removal tool if you need to remove your main engine fan to get the new belt on. That can be a little bit of a pain, but if you can, you might be able to snake the belt around the fan, go through the fan shroud with it to get it on. Also, to get the old belt off, you could probably just cut it off. So if you have the factory fan, you might need to get a little bit creative. Also, it's going to be fairly a tight space to work in, so I would not really recommend using deep well sockets. You might be able to for some of the tensioner hardware, but for most of the frontal hardware, you're going to need a short socket because you just might not have the room for tools. Alright, so disregard the fact that there are some components of the cooling system removed. I'm also working on that, but this is also going to give me a better visual chance to show you guys what's going on, because we don't have the radiator or the fan shroud or any of that stuff clogging up space. You guys can get a better visual of what's going on here. So you have your AC belt and your main belt. So we're going to be replacing pretty much the belts, that guy, and then the tensioner piston down here. So a lot of these will have little covers on them, such as the idler pulley. This one's missing. The tensioner has a little cover on it on both. So if you take a little flathead screwdriver and just kind of pop that little cover off, you can actually see where you're going to stick your little tensioner tool on. So both of these guys are an 8mm Allen key. So I have one on a 3/8 ratchet here. They are 8mm Allen keys. They're nothing else. Don't use anything else, otherwise you're going to strip the hell out of it. I've done that and it sucks. So we're going to start by taking the AC belt off. You can press the tensioner. You can just sort of walk the belt off. And we can take the belt off all the way. And the same thing is going to go for the main drive belt. Now you have to take the AC belt off to get the main drive belt completely off. And we can pull that guy out. So I'm going to do the main belt stuff first, and then we'll go after the AC belt stuff after that. The first thing is the idler pulley. So I like to pull the idler pulley off first just because it gives us a little bit more room to work. Pull all that stuff off. This also gives us a bit more room to work on the actual tensioner itself. Now, to get the actual tensioner housing off, you do need to remove the pulley. And again, it is an 8mm nut. So if you go on, it's going to compress the tensioner. If you go off, you're going to loosen the bolts on the actual pulley itself. So we're going to pull that off. There we go. And now we have access to the remainder of the bolts that hold this guy on. So there are 3 bolts that hold that into place. One is at the bottom of the hydraulic piston. One of them is right on the top, right there. And then the third one is a little bit deeper in. You can get an extension in there. You can get him on. If you get a 13 on a short extension, you can find him. There's one. The second one is at the bottom of the tensioner, the little piston itself, and the main guy. Then our tensioner can come out. So the rebuild kit we will be using comes with a full new assembly, pretty much the same thing. But for those of you guys who are not running the kit, I'm going to show you guys how to take this guy off. So there's pretty much just a 13mm there. That whole assembly will come out. From there, you can just straight up lift that off, and then you can work the piston off. So if you're going to be rebuilding your tensioner, make sure to get all the old grease off of that, as well as inside of there, and then just put some fresh grease on, because these are needle bearings. And then the new tensioner is going to go on. So I like to put the bottom one on first. So that's kind of the orientation that it goes in, and then this guy is going to slide up. So I've noticed that the tensioner pistons always stick up a little bit higher than the bolt hole that you're going to need to thread into. So you're going to have to compress the tensioner piston just a little bit to get that bolt back in there. But once it's in there, tighten it down and throw it all back together. So with the tensioner off, you can get a better look at where that third guy is. So that is the hole at the bottom of the piston, and then there's one right there on the side. Get that one started. So the longer of the 2 bolts is going to be the bolt that goes through the piston itself, the little bottom section there. And I'll usually start this one second because it'll line up the third hole that you can't see a lot better. And then you can throw your third bolt on the ratchet or on the socket and sort of feel for where that guy is going to have to go in. There we go. We'll get him threaded. So I never really worry too much about torquing these. I'll just get them nice and tight. If you are inclined to torque it, I want to say the torque spec's like 192, 182, 192, something like that, but I like to get them just nice and tight. So now we're going to throw our new tensioner pulley on there, and he does have like a little washer shim that goes on the back. Thread our 8mm bolt through there. And again on this one, I don't really worry too much about torque. If you tighten it until the tensioner will start to compress, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. So the new idler pulley that came with this kit has its own little cap. So we're going to go ahead and pop that guy off. Good enough. And this kit came with a new bolt for that guy, so we're going to go ahead and use that. Now one thing to note is the new idler pulley and the old idler pulley, they both have these little dowel pins, and there's a little indent on the alternator for where that pin is going to go. So make sure that guy is dialed in and locked where he needs to be. If it's not in, it's not going to sit straight. Through the idler. And that whole assembly gets to go back on. And we'll get him nice and tight too. If you feel inclined, now would be a good time to wipe down all of the pumps and pulleys and everything that the serpentine belt attaches to, just to make sure that it has a good mating surface. If everything looks good and you don't have any fluid leaks in this whole area, then I wouldn't worry too much about wiping it down, but it never hurts to. So we have our new belt. Our belt ratting goes around the crankshaft, around the power steering pump, up over the alternator, under the idler pulley, over the water pump, back this way through the tensioner and then back onto the crank pulley. So we have our new belt. It's going to bend back over the tensioner. Under the water pump. It'll go under the idler pulley and over the power steering pump. Now before you compress the tensioner, I like to make sure that everything is on both sides of all the pulleys it needs to be. If it's not on a pulley completely, if it's like off to the side like that on the bottom of one of them, you're probably not going to be able to get the belt on all the way. And again, this guy is an 8mm. So I'm going to compress the new tensioner. Under like that. Make sure we're on all of our pulleys, which we are, and let it rip. Alright, so now onto the AC tensioner. I'm doing this from underneath because it gives me a better visual angle for you guys as to what's going on, but you do not have to be under the car to remove this pulley tensioner setup. So we have a bolt right there, we have a bolt right over here, and then again on that main swivel point we also have a bolt. We're going to go ahead and take all three of those off. So this tensioner is AC tensioner. It's set up very similar to the main tensioner, except this part is a little bit backwards. It's interesting to me that they don't include a new pulley for this. I looked on the parts list and it didn't have one, so oh well. We're going to take that 13 off. Be sure to keep track of all your little washers. And now we should be able to pull our old one off. And that guy should come up. So I'm going to wipe off that brace. And we'll wipe that one off as well for the new tensioner. I'm also going to clean up inside of there as best I can. There's a lot of old grease and dirt. So I have a little bit of wheel bearing grease. Could be multi-purpose grease. Grease is kind of grease. So I'm going to spread that all around that guy. And we're going to slide him back together. Make sure he's running smooth. Feels good. And I also like to put a little bit of grease on this, just to get it on a little bit easier. So, big end on that guy. Slides on nice. And we're going to put our washer back on. We'll get that guy going. Get him nice and tight, and now he's ready to go back in the car. I'm going to go for the big guy first. We'll get him started. The longer of the two smaller bolts is going to go through that guy, the bottom of the tensioner bolt. And then our third guy just sort of hangs out back there. And be sure you have your washer on that guy. Get him nice and tight. And then we'll get our other two nice and tight. Alright, beautiful. Alright, so now we can go after our AC belt. So this guy goes over the crank, around the AC compressor, and up under the tensioner. So I'm going to get him on the compressor first. then you can just sort of hang out like that. So again, this tensioner is an 8mm. And we are going to want to make sure that it is on all the way. One thing I've noticed with this is if you compress it all the way, you can pinch the belt between the crank pulley and the tensioner. It kind of makes it a little bit of a pain to get on. So just be mindful of that. If you cannot get yours on for some stupid reason, you might be pinching the belt between the crank pulley and the tensioner. Once that is on, we can put our little cap on. And that's it, baby, we're done. Alright, all of our belts and tensioners are replaced. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I'll see you guys later.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard.